Okay, so you want to run a medieval mercenary company. It is the late 14th century, and you are standing outside an Italian city with several hundred armed men. Inside the walls, officials are counting money. Outside, their clerks are counting your soldiers. Horses stamp in the mud. Crossbowmen wait beside bundles of equipment. Sub-captains call men forward while inspectors compare faces, animals, and weapons with the force promised in your contract. The city has enemies and citizens who would prefer not to fight them. You have trained soldiers who can arrive together, march under one command, and remain in the field for months. The contract makes you look rich. Most of the money, though, already belongs to other people. Your soldiers expect wages. Horses need fodder whether the city treasury is open or closed. Grain merchants want payment, armor needs repair, and every day spent waiting consumes supplies. If the employer pays late, none of these expenses agrees to wait out of courtesy. Fighting is only part of the business. The harder job is keeping hundreds of armed men together between one payment and the next. This is not a modern company. There are no shares, no limited liability, and no permanent payroll department. The organization rests on contracts, personal loyalties, military reputation, and the expectation of future profit. At the center stands the captain. A city does not want to negotiate with every mounted soldier, crossbowman, servant, and subordinate commander. It deals with you. You promise a certain number and type of troops for a fixed period. You assemble them, enforce discipline, and distribute the money. That arrangement saves the city a great deal of work. It also leaves you responsible when the soldiers have not been paid. You begin with people who know your name. Veterans, trusted officers, and sub-captains form the core. Some sub-captains arrive with whole bands of followers. A mounted man-at-arms may bring his own armor, weapons, horses, and servant. He is not simply selling his time. He is bringing a small military unit with him. You do not necessarily own every horse or suit of armor in the company. Much of that equipment belongs to the men who use it. Their pay must support more than food and labor. Animals have to be fed, gear maintained, servants supported, and losses replaced. The company grows in layers. The employer pays the captain. The captain pays subordinate commanders, who then settle with the men attached to them. Money moves downward through relationships that may have existed long before the present contract. When money stops moving, those relationships start to loosen. Before recruitment can begin on any serious scale, you need either cash or credit. An advance from the employer can bring men to the muster, purchase provisions, replace animals, and cover an initial distribution of wages. Without it, you rely on personal wealth, financial partners, merchants willing to extend credit, or soldiers prepared to serve before receiving everything they are owed. That last group is lending you more than labor. A veteran who follows you unpaid is risking his horse, equipment, and earning time on your promise that the campaign will eventually produce wages, booty, or both. Men will accept that promise if your previous campaigns ended well. They become less patient if your last company scattered hungry and unpaid. Your reputation, therefore, has a cash value. It determines how long people will wait, how easily you can borrow, and how many soldiers will appear when you send out a call. Once the force gathers, the city wants to see what it is buying. Italian military contracts, known as condotte, could specify troop numbers, types of soldiers, length of service, pay, provisions, exemptions from tolls, inspections, discipline, and penalties for desertion or betrayal. The detail is not decorative. Each clause exists because someone has argued about it before. Then comes the muster. Officials count the men and inspect their equipment. A soldier whose name appears on a list, but whose body is somewhere else, cannot defend a wall. A weak horse presented as a sound military animal does not provide the service the city agreed to purchase. You have reason to make the company look as large and capable as possible. If the city pays for 500 men while you actually maintain fewer, the difference might remain in your hands. The city knows this. Its clerks compare the written force with the one standing in front of them. Equipment can be borrowed for an inspection. Horses can be exchanged. A man may appear fit during the muster and disappear soon afterward. The employer counts because the captain has an incentive to exaggerate. The captain watches the inspectors because the employer has an incentive to reduce payment. No one has met the enemy yet. The first contest is over arithmetic. Suppose your company passes inspection with 500 fighting men. Some are mounted men-at-arms. Others fight on foot or carry crossbows. Around them are servants, grooms, drivers, traders, and craftsmen. Not all of these people draw wages directly from you, but they travel with the force, buy food, occupy road space, and slow the column. The first contract payment arrives. It is revenue. It is not profit. Sub-captains claim their portions. Soldiers expect wages. Merchants have supplied grain. Horse dealers and smiths must be paid often enough to keep doing business with you. A cavalry force contains a surprising amount of iron, leather, wood, and tired animal flesh. All of it needs attention. Payroll is the largest direct obligation. Food and fodder continue every day. Men can eat bread, grain, beans, cheese, wine, meat when it is available, and whatever the local market can provide. Horses are less adaptable. They need grass, hay, straw, or grain, depending on the season and the work being demanded of them. For a rough planning example, imagine 500 horses requiring about 20 pounds of dry fodder each on a day when grazing is poor. That comes to roughly 5 tons. The exact ration changes with the animals, the weather, and the country. The useful point is the weight. A mounted company does not merely pass through a landscape. It eats the landscape by the wagon load. In a fertile district during a good season, fodder can be bought or gathered along the route. A long siege is different. So is winter or a region already crossed by another army. The horses remain in one place while nearby supplies disappear. Each new wagon must come from farther away. A contract may place some responsibility for provisions on the employer. The company might receive access to markets or relief from certain tolls. In other cases, you buy supplies and recover the expense from contract money. Most days, this is ordinary business. Grain arrives. Fodder is distributed. Men are paid. The column moves. Cities hire captains because this arrangement can work quite well. Maintaining the same number of troops permanently would require feeding and paying them through peaceful years, as well as dangerous ones. A contract lets the city purchase an organized force for a season or campaign. When the term ends, officials expect the expense to end too. They are buying military capacity without accepting permanent responsibility for the men who provide it. Your formal income comes from the employer, a prince, noble, pope, or city. The contract may cover a campaign, territorial defense, a siege, or service in a garrison. Payment can be divided across the term, with inspections and performance affecting what is released. Contract money also makes other earnings possible. Captured weapons, armor, horses, livestock, cloth, plate, and portable valuables may become booty. Some items can be sold. Others are more useful inside the company. A captured horse replaces one lost on campaign. Grain feeds the men. Armor can be reused. The rules for dividing booty depend on the force, employer, and campaign. There is no single medieval formula that applies everywhere. Whatever arrangement you use, it must keep the company functioning. Take everything for yourself, and the soldiers lose a major reason to follow you. Let every man keep whatever he can seize, and discipline disappears the moment a town is entered. The company needs a division that rewards the captor, recognizes claims from commanders or the employer, and leaves room for shared obligations. A silver cup attracts attention, but ordinary goods often matter more. Cattle can walk away from the place where they were captured. Grain does not need to be converted into money before it becomes useful. Serviceable armor can return to the field on another man's body. Late medieval warfare also offers a more complicated prize: prisoners. A wealthy knight or noble may be worth far more alive than dead. His family, lord, or allies may pay for his release. Soldiers in the Hundred Years' War could regard ransom as one of the most valuable forms of booty. A prisoner, however, is not cash. He is a claim that might produce cash later. First, you must establish who he is. Then he must be guarded and fed. Negotiators have to locate people capable of guaranteeing payment. Property may need to be sold, money borrowed, or relatives contacted. The captive may escape, die, conceal his identity, or possess a famous title without much accessible wealth. Ransom rights can also be disputed. The man who physically took the prisoner may have one claim, his commander another, and the employer yet another. A ransom claim can be divided or transferred, especially when someone else is better placed to collect it. Until the settlement arrives, your valuable captive is another mouth. A company can finish a successful campaign with captured animals, armor, and several promising prisoners, yet still lack enough coin for the next wage payment. Rich on paper is an old military tradition. The city that hired you understands some of these dangers. Its officials may inspect the company repeatedly, place observers near your command, reserve part of the payment until the end, and write rules about where your men may march or take supplies. Their control has limits. The city signs the contract, but the soldiers receive their money through you. A distant council may be the legal employer. The captain who pays, distributes booty, settles disputes, and finds the next contract is the person the men encounter every day. A company that survives for years can retain its internal structure while passing through several employers. The banner remains familiar even when the client changes. Some contracts tried to limit service for a rival after the term ended. The concern is obvious. A city might spend months supporting an effective military organization, then see the same men appear in enemy service the following season. From your side, finding another employer after a contract expires is not unusual. The soldiers still need wages. Another city may offer a longer term, better access to provisions, or a campaign with richer prospects. The old employer may feel that the force belongs to it. The soldiers tend to measure loyalty by a simpler standard: who is still paying? During a normal campaign, much of your work does not involve a pitched battle. The company reinforces garrisons, raids enemy territory, patrols approaches, threatens towns, and makes the employer's demands more convincing. A town may negotiate because your soldiers are visible outside the walls. That is often a good outcome for you. Battles are expensive. Victory may bring booty and prisoners, but it can also kill experienced soldiers and horses. A veteran mounted man represents years of training along with valuable equipment and animals. A war horse lost in combat cannot be replaced by putting a saddle on the nearest plow horse. The head count after a battle may look respectable while the company's military value has fallen sharply. Some men have lost mounts. Armor is damaged. Subcaptains are dead or captured. Units that once moved together are now collections of survivors. The next employer pays for the force you can present at muster, not the force you commanded before the battle. A captain, therefore, has reason to preserve the company. This does not mean mercenary troops refuse serious combat. They fought, won, lost, and died like other soldiers. But the captain's calculation is not identical to the employer's. The employer wants a result during the present contract. You need enough of the company to survive into the next one. Now the payment is late. At first, reserves cover the gap. You delay your own share. Subcaptains accept a partial distribution because the city is expected to release the balance. Merchants continue extending credit because a formal contract with a wealthy government appears to be reasonable security. The company keeps eating. After a few weeks, soldiers ask whether the city has paid. You can answer honestly, but honesty does not settle their wages. They did not negotiate with the council. They came because you called them. You can borrow against the expected money or demand another advance. The employer may offer provisions instead of coin, or assign some claim on future revenue. Subcaptains can be persuaded to wait a little longer. These measures buy time. They do not erase the debt. As the delay continues, merchants shorten their credit. Prices rise around the camp. Soldiers sell captured goods. Some begin looking for another captain. A subordinate commander with enough followers may negotiate independently. Desertion is more than a missing body. The departing soldier takes his weapons, experience, horse, and perhaps several companions. At the next muster, the company is smaller. A smaller force earns a smaller contract, which makes the remaining men harder to pay. No battle is required. The organization can dissolve while sitting beside a friendly city. Disbanding stops some future expenses, but it also destroys what you spent years assembling. Trusted soldiers may join competitors. The next time war creates demand, someone else may reach them first. Anyone who leaves believing you still owe wages will repeat that story. The other option is to keep the men together by finding resources outside the contract. It may begin as requisition. Soldiers take grain, wine, animals, and lodging, perhaps leaving written promises that the employer will settle later. If those promises are honored, the arrangement can still resemble military supply. If they are not, the distinction between requisition and robbery becomes largely a matter of handwriting. Soon livestock disappears from villages. Merchants avoid the roads. A town may decide that paying the company to leave is cheaper than resisting it. The town is not purchasing a military victory. It is purchasing the company's absence. A fortified position gives armed men shelter and storage. It may also control a road, river crossing, or surrounding district. Removing the company by force could cost more than negotiating its departure. At that point, the captain is no longer waiting passively for a customer. Armed power itself produces revenue. This happened most visibly in 14th century France. The Hundred Years' War created large numbers of experienced soldiers. Truces then interrupted employment without removing the men's weapons, habits, or need for food. After the Peace of Bretigny in 1360, many soldiers were left without regular service. Some joined the armed groups commonly called free companies. They occupied strong places and lived from the surrounding country when no government was paying them. The peace signed by rulers did not demobilize the market for violence. It released trained men back into it. A king or prince could hire such companies again. He might also try to send them into somebody else's war. Armed men who were ruinous in France became useful if their destination lay far beyond French villages. Ending a contract had shifted the cost. The treasury stopped paying, so the countryside paid instead. Italian cities developed a more formal market around the condotte. The contract tried to define military service in measurable terms. How many men, what kind of troops, how long they would serve, who supplied provisions, when inspections took place, and what happened if men deserted or the captain betrayed the employer. The document gave both sides a claim. It did not make enforcement easy. If you fail to present the promised force, the city can withhold payment and damage your prospects for future contracts. It may control property, pensions, or offices that matter to you. If the city refuses to pay while your armed company is still assembled, its legal remedies may look stronger than yours. Your practical leverage is harder to ignore. John Hawkwood became one of the most famous captains in this Italian world. An English soldier active in 14th century Italy, he and the White Company served a succession of employers. Cities had to consider not only the value of hiring his force, but the danger of leaving it available to somebody else. Florence eventually employed Hawkwood as captain general and rewarded him with pensions and honors. His value did not rest on one battle. He could maintain a recognizable military organization, negotiate new service, and persuade both soldiers and governments that he would still matter next season. A city might pay to use that force. Under the right circumstances, it might also pay because it preferred the force to remain neutral or go elsewhere. Continuity was the product. The Catalan company shows how far that continuity could carry an army beyond its first contract. At the beginning of the 14th century, veterans from wars in the Western Mediterranean gathered under Roger de Flor. The Byzantine emperor hired them to fight Turkish forces in Anatolia. They arrived already organized, under their own commanders, and proved militarily effective. Relations with the Byzantine authorities deteriorated. Money, provisions, violence, and political influence all became points of conflict. Roger de Flor was assassinated in 1305. The company did not disappear with him. Its soldiers retaliated across Byzantine territory. They later moved into Greece, defeated the army of the Duchy of Athens in 1311, and took control of the duchy. Most mercenary companies never conquered territory of their own. The Catalan company was an extreme case. It still exposed the danger built into the original bargain. An employer wanted troops who were already organized because organized troops were useful. When the relationship collapsed, that same organization allowed them to keep operating without him. The contract ended. The armed network survived. Your own Italian contract is now approaching its last month. Renewal is the simplest outcome. If the city still needs you and can pay, the company stays assembled. Existing supply arrangements continue, and the men know where the next distribution should come from. Another employer may offer better terms after the agreement expires. Distance matters. A generous contract on the other side of the mountains loses value with every day of travel, every wagon of fodder, and every horse that fails on the road. Garrison service can provide continuity with less movement. It may be less profitable than a rich campaign, but fixed positions are easier to supply. Horses do less work, and the men remain attached to an employer. You can also release part of the force and retain a smaller core of officers and veterans. Consumption falls. So does your ability to expand quickly when a new contract appears. Predation produces immediate supplies, but it leaves a long bill. Towns close their gates. Merchants stop extending credit. Guides refuse to help. Former employers begin treating the company as an enemy, and neighboring governments may cooperate against it. Robbery can feed soldiers tonight. It is a poor foundation for next season's contract. The captains who last are rarely committed to respectability or violence alone. They use enough discipline to remain employable and enough force to remain difficult to ignore. Pensions, offices, land, and citizenship can tie them to a solvent patron. Negotiation may preserve the company more effectively than battle. This is where the clerk beside your command table earns his place. He tracks who served, which wages were distributed, what the city still owes, which prisoners might produce ransom, and which subcaptain claims part of the booty. He carries letters and preserves the written evidence behind demands for payment. Without records, every unpaid wage becomes a separate argument. Without reliable messengers, a possible contract remains a rumor until another captain signs it. Information saves money in quieter ways. A guide who finds a usable crossing can shorten the march and reduce fodder consumption. A merchant who knows where grain is stored can shape the route. An interpreter may keep a supply negotiation from turning into a skirmish. A scout who warns you away from a stronger army protects the whole organization. These people are inexpensive compared with the force their information preserves. Then you lose a battle. The financial result depends on what survived. If the retreat remains orderly and casualties are limited, the company can regroup. Stragglers return. Animals are replaced where possible. The employer may be angry, but you still have a force that can be offered elsewhere. Heavy horse losses are worse. Mounted soldiers without replacements may leave, borrow, or accept service on foot for lower pay. If subcaptains are captured, their followers may scatter. If you are the prisoner, the company faces the uncomfortable task of finding your ransom while struggling to meet its own wages. Defeat also damages the fear that helps sell your service. A town hires you, partly because it expects its enemies to take your arrival seriously. Once that reputation weakens, so does your price. Even so, one battle need not destroy the company. Its military capital is spread across many soldiers and subordinate leaders. You do not keep the entire organization in a warehouse. Men can regroup, bring their equipment back, and gather around surviving commanders. That loose structure makes the company difficult to control. It also makes it difficult to kill completely. Prolonged non-payment can be more destructive than a single defeat. A battle removes men at once. Arrears make them reconsider one by one. As long as the soldiers believe you can obtain money, many will wait. Once they decide you cannot, they leave, seize supplies, or attach themselves to someone with better prospects. Eventually, the banner still exists, but the organization behind it does not. Your earnings are whatever remains after wages, credit, provisions, essential specialists, lost equipment, and the claims of subordinate commanders have been settled. Booty may increase that remainder. One valuable ransom can transform a campaign. Pensions, offices, or land can turn military success into wealth that survives beyond the next payroll. The face value of the contract tells you very little about what reaches your purse. Some of the money belongs to the soldiers. Some maintains horses. Some purchases food. Some repays the credit that assembled the company before the employer paid. Some may never arrive. A captain can pass thousands of florins through his hands and finish with very little coin of his own. Another may become wealthy through favorable contracts, valuable captives, and a city willing to reward long service. Winning helps. Getting paid matters more. Keeping the men together until the money arrives matters most. What you sell is not violence alone. A war zone contains plenty of that. You sell armed men who arrive at the appointed place, under recognizable command, in something close to the promised number. Men who remain together long enough to carry out the contract. Return to the city gate. The officials see 500 soldiers outside their walls. They are thinking about enemy movements, troop numbers, and the total written on the agreement. You are watching the grain wagons. You know how much money has arrived, how many days the fodder will last, which sub-captain is losing patience, and which neighboring ruler has asked when your current contract ends. If the city pays, you are its army. When the contract expires, another city may hire you. If nobody does, hundreds of armed men still have to eat. War creates the company. Payroll decides where it goes.